NBC's Garrett Haake is covering the White House. NBC's Courtney Kube is on Capitol Hill. Mark Mazzetti is an investigative reporter for the New York Times focused on national security. And with me here in studio, retired Army Colonel Jack Jacobs, recipient of the Medal of Honor and an MSNBC military analyst. So, Garrett, no decision from the president. What do we know about what's happening behind closed doors? Who might have his ear? Bring us up to speed.
Yeah, Chris, well, no decision announced. I think it's entirely possible that the president has made some choices. He's just not willing to talk about them yet. He's being advised by his national security team, I'm told, more or less around the clock in a series of meetings and in the way that he likes to often kind of socialize any big decision, sort of in a constant running conversation with his staff. Everything that this White House is doing, everything the president is saying, seems to be pointing in one direction. The president, in that same running gaggle on the White House lawn a short time ago, saying that the advice he gave to Benjamin Netanyahu, for example, was to keep going, saying that his message to the Iranians who say they want to fight back is good luck, and saying this when asked what his post yesterday meant when he called for the complete surrender of Iran. Listen.
What does unconditional surrender mean? Can you explain it for those who don't?
Two very simple words. Very simple. Unconditional surrender. That means I've had it. Okay, I've had it. I give up. No more. They were bullies. They were schoolyard bullies. And now they're not bullies anymore, but we'll see what happens. Look, nothing's finished until it's finished. I wouldn't say that we won anything yet. I would say that we sure as hell made a lot of progress. And we'll see. The next week is going to be very big, maybe less than a week.
So a little bit of a tease there, a little bit of bellicose rhetoric, and all of it backed up by the White House, which has been sending around quotes of all the times that the president has said, either in the White House or on the campaign trail, that Iran cannot be allowed to have a nuclear weapon. We heard similar language from J.D. Vance on Capitol Hill yesterday. So, again, no decision yet, but the signs here at the White House seem to be pointing in one direction, Chris.
So, Mark, your new article laid out a fascinating timeline that recently as April, the president was pretty staunchly against this. So how did he go from that to seriously considering not only supporting Israel's effort, but potentially joining it?
Well, some of it has to do with the increased leverage that Prime Minister Netanyahu had since last fall. The things that used to keep Netanyahu from striking Iran, like a Hezbollah retaliation, like Iranian missiles, like the fact that they had to fly through Syrian airspace, all these things sort of fell away last fall, and the risks to Israel and to Netanyahu lowered. And so he began this renewed push this spring to strike, and by late May, it was clear to U.S. intelligence that Israel was going to strike with or without the United States. So Netanyahu, who once needed the United States, needed them less so. And so then Trump was put in this position of, well, would he join once Israel attacked? Now, of course, we know that Israel can only do so much. And what awaits now is this decision about whether the United States will join with these bunker buster bombs that Israel does not have to get deeply fortified locations. So in a way, it became Netanyahu doing something where it became a fait accompli, and then it's now in Trump's court.
Yeah, and Colonel, as he said, we may learn something in the next week. Who knows when, maybe sooner, if the U.S. commits to helping Israel take out Iran's nuclear facilities, even just the one at Fordo, which is the one that's deeply embedded in a mountain. What are the chances we could limit it at that?
Well, it might be even more limited than what you're suggesting. It's not guaranteed that even one or more than one bunker buster bombs will be able to destroy that site.
Well, is it the general belief that it would probably take multiples of?
It definitely would take multiples of those bombs. And even then, you may only restrict access to it, and eventually it might be able to be recovered by the Iranians. So it might slow them down, but it won't necessarily take them out of the business of developing nuclear weapons. I mean, most of their a lot of their fissile material has already been moved to other locations, which we may or may not know about. So it's not going to be a knockout punch that people expect. However, you're going to expect counterattacks by Iran on our forces in the Middle East. Like we said, there are 40 to 50,000 Americans in the region, some of them in fixed bases. We have ships in the region, plus commercial shipping. You can expect that the Straits of Hormuz will be mined by the Iranians or their proxies. There'll be attacks from Yemen by the Houthis on commercial and military shipping. So it's going to be difficult to limit it. And we also have to keep in mind the fact that the Israelis, while they're not actually running low on their Iron Dome ammunition, they certainly have lots less of it now than they did at the beginning of the war. So there are lots of imponderables here. The likelihood of this being over in a short time, very, very low, Chris.
So what did we hear, Courtney, from the Defense Secretary, Pete Hegseth? Did he have any more insight into the options that the U.S., that the president is weighing right now?
No, not really. I mean, keep in mind, this was the first time that he's appeared before the Senate Armed Services Committee since his confirmation hearing back in January. So the questions were really all over the map. I mean, dealing with everything that has happened in a very busy past several months since Pete Hegseth has been Secretary of Defense. But he was asked about Iran. He was asked about conversations that he had with the president about possible options. He declined to give any details, though. Here's what he had to say.
Most of what I can or should say would be reserved for a classified setting. I would say the president, obviously, any decisions on this matter are at the presidential level. My job, our job, Chairman and I, at all times, is to make sure the president has options and is informed of what those options might be and what the ramifications of those options might be.
I appreciate that.
You mentioned the troops in the region. With maximum
expect
force protection at all times is being maintained.
And that's really the biggest issue when it comes to what could happen here. If the United States were to be involved in a military strike or strikes against Iran, the biggest concern that officials we've spoken to have is what the military calls their second and third order effects. So would U.S. bases, U.S. personnel in the region, as you mentioned, there's thousands of them forward deployed in the region. There's ships off the coast. There's more moving in towards the region, literally as we speak. Would they be a potential target? That's the biggest concern. Officials telling us that they are at the highest state of readiness for the potential for some sort of attack. But, Chris, the reality is they've been at a heightened state of readiness ever since October 7th. It's only been heightened since Israel began this air campaign, this strike campaign in Iran late last week. But defense officials are very concerned about the possibility that, again, if the United States were to be involved in a kinetic part of this conflict, so not just support, that there would be ramifications for U.S. personnel in the region.
Thank you so much, Courtney Kube, on the Hill for us. So, Mark, we know there is this split between some hardliners who are pushing for a stronger response to Iran, others who want to stay out of the war. Tucker Carlson, who's very much in that latter group, did an interview with Senator Ted Cruz, who has advocated for regime change. And it started with Tucker Carlson asking Cruz if he knew how many people lived in Iran, and then it grew more heated from there.
I don't sit around memorizing population tables.
Well, it's kind of relevant because you're calling for the overthrow of the government.
Why is it relevant whether it's 90 million or 80 million or 100 million? Why is that relevant?
Because if you don't know anything about the country...
I didn't say I don't know anything about
Okay, what's the ethnic mix of Iran?
They are Persians and predominantly Shia. Okay,
it's not even... You don't know anything about Iran. So
okay, I am not the Tucker Carlson expert on Iran.
You're a senator who's calling for the overthrow of the government.
You're the one who
don't know anything about the country.
No, you don't know anything about the country.
So, so many questions, Mark, out of that. But maybe the most pointed one is, do we have any sense of who Trump is listening to now? Is political pressure weighing on him at all? Is this purely a national security debate right now? What do we know about the considerations, if anything?
You know, I mean, that's a great question. And especially in this second term with President Trump, it's really much more of a mystery of what ultimately is guiding these kind of decisions. I think the first term, given his circle of advisors, it was a lot more stable in sort of knowing who was advising and where he was getting the inputs from. This time around, it's a lot more difficult. I mean, obviously, we know the past positions of people like J.D. Vance. We obviously know where Tucker Carlson stands. He's not an official advisor, but obviously someone who President Trump has listened to in the past. It shows that the clip you showed, it just clearly shows a lot of the schisms within the president's own party. And so my guess is that these kinds of debates and different fights for the president's mind are going to last right up until he makes the decision, if he hasn't already.
So, Jack, when Iran threatens all-out war, what does that even look like? What's the risk to the U.S.? Is it confined mostly to those 40 or 50,000 troops, as you say, who are in the direct path?
Yeah, probably not is the answer to the latter question. Saying all-out war is a bit like the vague assertion that what we want is unconditional surrender. Surrender to whom? What's the war really look like? And the likelihood is that if there are attacks on American personnel and American assets in the region, that we will retaliate directly onto specific targets that will have already been selected, and they have been selected by the National Command Authority, who will then issue instructions for those specific targets inside Iran to be.
I mean, that's a given,
struck.
right? You cannot sit if there's been a direct attack on American troops.
Although we have done that in the past, we've turned the other cheek in the past.
In this administration?
No, not in this administration. And the likelihood of that's happening again, that's also very, very low. Iran is in a very difficult position from a wide variety of standpoints, not the least significant of which is that they've got a large, and some would say a restive population who themselves are willing to see some change, are not particularly interested in seeing a continuation of the theocracy. But one of the things that happens when you attack a nation, even if they don't get along internally, is that you have a tendency to weld them together. Unfortunately for Iran, they don't have the military capability to stand up to the United States or its allies, which is why I suggested that any involvement of the United States in this conflict is liable to elicit a conflict that may take a little bit longer than people now think to resolve itself.